Welcome back to our third session for today. So I have the pleasure in welcoming our sponsor, Jeff Van de Cruz from Mediagenics, Anthony Shana from Telecom for the panel Telecom Operators Going into OTT. And this session will be moderated by Michaela Celli. Michaela, over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this very interesting panel today. I have the pleasure to have with me two great panelists and speakers, and I would like to ask both of them to introduce themselves and the company they're working with within the OTT and media landscape. So, Jeff, please welcome, and we are happy to have you, and kindly introduce more about yourself and Mediagenics.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hello, I'm Jeff Van de Cruz. I'm the managing director of Mediagenics. Myself, I'm in the company for 3 years now, and in the business, let's say, for more than 20 years. Mediagenics is a company providing software solutions for content supply chain. This means that we help you in the automatization of your content flow in your own content ecosystem. We are in the business for almost 30 years. We are a global company with presence in different regions. I would like to thank you for having me and looking forward to the conversation. So I believe over to Anthony.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Michaela, and thank you to all of you for dialing in. My name is Anthony Shiner. I've been in the Do Telecom group for about 3.5 years. Do Telecom is a integrated telecommunications provider in the UAE. We do obviously mobile, fixed across both consumer and enterprise. We've been in the market for about 15 years now. So we're relatively young, and we've grown remarkably well in that period of time. As I said, I've been here for about 3.5, almost 4 years now. My life started as the Chief Digital Lifestyle and Innovation Officer, and then my role has expanded where I now run, I'm Chief Customer and Channels Officer, so everything that touches customers from sales to installation engineering. Pretty much anytime there's any complaints or any problems, they either start or finish with me. So that's my job, and that's where we are. So thank you, and very much looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you both for the introduction. So since today we are talking about OTT and how the media landscape has changed, especially in the MENA region in the last few years, and also how COVID-19 accelerate, the development of both OTT players as well as customers shifting to more streaming services rather than traditional TV. Starting with Anthony, I would like to get your view on how is, from your perspective and from being part of the MENA region, how you see the OTT industry going on at the moment, and what are, let's say, the major opportunities and challenges of this sector based on your experience and based on your role at Do.
Yeah, look, the OTT generally as an industry is growing. I don't think anyone can dispute that. When you think about OTT, as a provider, we provide the platform. We enable an industry through the things that we do. We're seeing very clearly that people are making choices, and this gap that used to exist between a terrestrial network and a mobile network is very quickly disappearing. You saw that 3G networks allowed you to then view rich content on a mobile device. 4G allowed you to get streaming on a mobile device, similar to what you were getting at home. 5G basically gives you the ability, for most cases, to have a 4K, 8K experience. So there's now almost no difference between most of the services you can get on a terrestrial network and you can get on a mobile network, which means that OTT is leaving the house more aggressively than ever in a richer format than it's ever done before. So that's, I don't see it going. We're seeing the explosion of growth across different streaming services. So globally is a great example of what's actually happening here in the Middle East. You know, your strong players around Netflix and Amazon continue to grow. Disney Plus is not here yet, but it has a strong tie-ups to OSN, and you're seeing the content coming through OSN, and OSN themselves pushing harder into the streaming business. But what's really interesting about this opportunity is the overall number of hours that a household consumes media isn't changing. So there may have been a family of 4, they all sat around and watched 4 hours of TV, but it was together. What we're seeing is they're now watching 4 times the content, but the same number of hours. In other words, each individual is watching their own content rather than centralized around a single screen. So what does that mean? Well, the risk is that content is getting harder to reach consumers and to stand out. But more interestingly, it's creating strong niche products. So in the Middle East, English is very, very strong, but each Middle Eastern country has different niche and nuances to their particular market. So you're getting great opportunities around niche products starting to come through. Sport itself is very, very strong. So you're starting to see more of a crossover, and beIN, who are a partner of ours, we have the ability to sell their services on OTT. So they're migrating from the TV screen into the handset, into the handheld. And we're seeing lots more of that crossover, but lots more growth in niche. We're seeing people in particular pick up content that is unique to their tastes and available to them. And they're getting it in addition to normal mainstream streaming content. So there's some risks around that. How do I stand out when I have choice everywhere? And there is the other opportunity, which is actually now I can talk to a very specific segment. And unlike free-to-air television of past eras, the amount of data that a provider is then able to understand about consumers only helps reinforce curation of content specific to their needs. I will also mention that the largest users of the largest streaming services in the region are not paid for. You're still getting YouTube and Facebook are still the largest drivers of streaming content in the region, with obviously Netflix and Amazon playing a very significant role. But YouTube is still by far the largest streaming service that exists. So I think we're seeing good opportunities, but people are making choices, and providers are helping curate information that's relevant to an individual, and they're voting with their eyeballs. They're just using those eyeballs across different devices, different times, and in a much more personalized way than they have traditionally and over the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Jeff, based on your experience, as a technology player, but seeing how the industry evolving, what's your view on this very interesting market, on the OTT? What's your view?
Yeah, no, indeed, it is an interesting market. But what we saw in the past 30 years is that it started all from traditional broadcasting into the linear, focused on linear, and then it moved to VOD, the SVOD and the TVOD and all those kind of things. Then it moved to the OTT, and then it moves to the streamings. And at the end, there is a lot of social media. I strongly believe that a lot of those traditional broadcasters into the new OTT players, it's all about the mix of it. It's about how can I bring relevant content into the relevant place, household, rather on a mobile device, on a computer or on the screen. And that's an evolution that you see in all of the regions. I think one of the elements for telcos and for the OTT players is that the content lifetime value is probably one of the most important elements. This means that your content needs to have the right quality. Of course, you need to take a look at the cost of your operations and the utility. How relevant is your content? As Anthony mentioned, in a household, you have 4 different players of the content. One is looking at social media, the other one is looking just linear, the other one is looking on a streaming platform. So I believe that's a very important element to create value of your content. And then speed. It's speed about technology evolution. It's speed about also speed about the consumer behavior. It's shifting faster everywhere. So I believe it's important as a player in that ecosystem that you can tackle all of these elements let's say on a very efficient way. But indeed, seeing that mix I believe that OTT is probably the one that is popping up the most, the fast, and is kind of a huge player worldwide in this very important content broadcasting.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Definitely, we have seen, especially with COVID, most of even theatrical movies, they shift to streaming, because of the limitation that we had during the last couple of years. So definitely also consumers are responding to OTT, adopting not only one platform, but multiple platforms, like you have the Netflix, you have the Amazon Prime, plus in the region, you might have, as Anthony mentioned, these niche players catering for audience or sports. So we see a very complex interaction between the customer and the platform, but also the telco operator are coming to play a role on this. So I would like to ask Anthony, how you see the role of telco operator in this direct to consumer businesses in terms of partnership, like we know the direct carrier billing is very common in some of the MENA region countries, in terms of aggregator, like providing bundling offer, and you can mention more about what Du has done in the past years with some of the major players. And then what are the other models? Can be investment, content creator. So we would like to get your view, Anthony, on this very delicate relationship between OTT and telco players.
Yeah, look, I think, and it's a good question, because I think the value chain as it relates to content is evolving very, very quickly. We're less than a generation away. If I talk more broadly, we had the vinyl LP, then we went to the CD, then we went to MP3, and then we almost jumped over MP3 in a case of a couple of years and went straight to streaming. The speed at which these industries are compressing, and you're seeing not just the evolution of value chains, but revolutions within value chains, is accelerating in a way we've never seen before. So as a telco, one has to ask themselves, where do you want to play? How are you going to make your bets? Now, I love the story that China Mobile is the largest streaming service in the world. Now, let's just think about that. It's a one country product that has 250, 300 million streaming customers. There's more streaming customers on China Mobile using their services than Netflix. The third largest content providing market in the world behind Hollywood and Bollywood is in Nigeria. They're the third biggest content provider. So you're saying the value chain is going to continue to be disrupted. As a telco, we're not the size here in Dubai of China Mobile with their 900 plus million customers. We're 10 million. So it may not make commercial sense for us to be content creators specifically. Companies like Turkcell in Turkey have done a tremendous job of understanding and having unique opportunities through the language barrier and creating an ownership of end-to-end value chain management through uniqueness. We don't have that luxury. In fact, we have larger competitors in the region, but we also have global players with English also an equally dominant language here. So as a telco that is largely subscale in global terms, you have to make a choice. You need to form commercial partnerships. But if you're also wanting to take advantage of some of these opportunities, you need to be network-wise savvy, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But you may also decide to take early investments and become an investor in some of these content players. And we did that with I think the most successful regional streaming partner or OTT player to date in Angami. Angami is a music streaming service. We're an early investor in that. They're now listed on NASDAQ, and they've relocated their headquarters from Lebanon, where they started, into Abu Dhabi. And they have offices around and affiliated with scores of different telco networks around the world. So we took an early investment into that because we believe that it had an opportunity. On the flip side, we also have a commercial relationship. So we bundle services. I'm actually a regular Angami user every day. because the service itself allows me, it's quite an interesting service that allows me to satisfy my niche appetite for content and music streaming in particular. But even them, they're doing some other interesting stuff, which we can maybe talk about later, in how they're diversifying themselves as an OTT streaming player. Now, sitting in between all of that is, yes, we are the platform, but what is the role of, as cloud edge starts to come in? That's when we're pushing cloud close to the consumer to improve the experience that customers are actually receiving when they're using streaming services. Well, we sit in the middle of that as well. So you have an investor relationship, a commercial relationship, and then you're trying to optimize customer experience through technology plays that only a carrier can make. So we're trying to participate, or we are participating in this value chain, but more importantly, we have a lens to the commercial outcomes, the customer experience outcomes, and then we're trying to meld the two as our customers actually see fit. The interesting part of and I like to quote Steve Jobs as a classic video clip online when he says, technology should not be the decision pivot point. The customer should always start, and technology remains an enabler. We start, and when we look at it, the way we're managing our OTT, we're starting with customer and customer desire. We're starting with the preferences and the flexibility of preferences and creating technology to support that. The other interesting debate that comes, and why investing as well as commercial partnerships start to come together, is that the real battle is for who owns the customer. If you think about how the OTT players are playing, the question is they're using telco assets, paying telcos for services that are hugely dependent on the telco to be able to provide it. But the OTT players are also building direct relationships. So there is the battleground of the future may not actually be the content itself, but who actually owns the front door that allows content players and the consumer to connect in the most seamless way possible. Because when you had free-to-air in most markets, you had multiple TV channels, you simply turn the channel to choose. Now that we've gone this proliferation of both global and niche OTT players, does my bill now have to be 16 different providers every month that I have to pay a unique bill to?
Yes.
Would I prefer to go to one place and have one person help me organize my content in a different way? And whilst OTT providers became the aggregators of content, there is emerging a growing opportunity to become the aggregator of aggregators. And I think that that really focuses around who owns the customer. But if you think to the Steve Jobs comment, it's actually, if you start with the customer, it's about driving further and further simplicity for the customer. And that's why this value chain disruption I started with is becoming even more important, because that's a very dynamic shift in the relationship between consumer and the end content, and who's playing what role in that value chain.
Yeah, that's a brilliant, overview of this relationship, and now, as you mentioned, Anthony, how the value chain is changing. Jeff, technology is an important part of this. So, from your perspective, and with the reach of content, that each aggregator is providing, how technology and how Mediagenics can help to handle the content and create a content strategy for the OTT players. So what's your view on how technology help, presentation and aggregation of content?
Yeah, and I want to jump into the sentence that Anthony makes about Steve Jobs and the customer. I think one thing is clear: the telco today is already in the household. They are in already, and they do have a lot of data. And I think they need to play a clever role in about how to bring on top the content in the household, because that even goes further than the front door. And there, I believe that the challenge of all of these is data. I'm a strong believer that content is king and data is the queen, because and that's where the technology goes. There is a lot of automation taking place in the ecosystem. And of course, we're providing those kind of solutions for that. But I would advise, if you're further on as a telco player or an operator, that you need to think about how to embedded the data of the different areas of your content, of your existing household data, etc. And then, of course, it's up to the telco to decide, am I going just in the distribution modus, going aggregation or aggregation of aggregation? Or do I buy or produce my content themselves? And that's where we saw that a lot of companies were trying to do them all, and now they're shifting and try to take some partnerships in there. Now, I believe that technology in that choice can help, because there you have the capability to, as I come back to my previous one, on the mix. Is it relevant in the mix? And there is where you can have technology available, which can produce, easily manage, plan your content rather to traditional linear, to OTT, to streaming, or to social media. So I think in this challenge, the technology is only helping you, supporting you in succeeding in that creating a value of your content. So, and believe me, those technology evolutions are going faster and faster and faster. So coming back on your question, what about partnerships? I strongly believe that in those kind of elements, you need to go in partnerships. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, but there is a lot of things available. As Anthony also mentioned, take a look what's happening in China. So technology is there to support you, to help you to create that efficiency. And there we can definitely play a role, but also in the partnership of that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, I would like to go back to what Anthony mentioned before about the partnership and the role that Du is playing with Angami. You know, especially for the MENA region audience, Angami is such a success story, being the first tech Arab company be listed in the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. So I believe this is a very empowering case, you know, also to foster innovation and foster startup culture within the MENA region. And I'm glad to have here Anthony discussing a bit more about this opportunity. So can you, you know, as a case study of how a music streaming player starting from the MENA region, starting from Lebanon, is becoming a regional player and attract investment and support, as I believe, from key player like Du. Can you tell us more about how this partnership started and what are the next steps that you guys are working together? Because I believe this is very relevant for the audience, especially from this region.
Yeah, so I can't take any credit for the partnership with Angami and our original investment, as that was done before I started by people much smarter than me. But the value of that relationship is that within the region, and if you think about niche opportunities as they start, Angami was the first real streaming service dedicated towards people of Arabic-speaking areas. And because of that, and Lebanon's a great place where music is a core component of the culture, it started off local and then become global. Now, it wasn't put off by the fact that you have larger players in the market globally. And new entrants after they launch, they've always maintained a true line of sight to their vision. And they've provided a very, very strong play in their niche, which is Arabic music. Because they've always understood what their customer tastes are evolving to, they also understood the value chain attached to music beyond just streaming. So how does it move into personalized events or broadcast events? How does it go into concerts? What's next? And there's a very, very clear roadmap for what streaming means today and what streaming means globally. The other example that kind of also highlights this is you think about gaming. Gaming used to be a floppy disk into an old hard drive, for those of you old enough to remember those. It then turned into consoles, and then it turned into some online gaming. And now, you know, we're having demands from people to understand, you know, what's your upload time, what's your latency rates. You know, we're getting huge amounts of information, and gaming went from kids in their bedroom and lounge rooms to full setups to global gaming platforms, global competitions, multi-million-dollar a year champions on gaming that you've never heard of. So you're seeing that streaming itself and OTT plays and gaming, they're emerging in their own right. Now, it's having a clear lens on how that evolution is taking place. What is the technological enablement to allow the customer demand to evolve more rapidly? So you went from purely a digital business to a link to physical. And people say, how is e-gaming physical? Well, you only need to go onto YouTube and look at the stadiums and concert halls that are being jam-packed with people watching people play games. And now, so you're getting this, I can only be digital for a period of time, but human beings by their very nature are social beings. And COVID has accelerated the E aspect of what's actually happening. But there is a journey back towards physical. And that just doesn't happen in OTT, it doesn't just happen in streaming. I mean, Amazon launched itself as a bookshop and eventually opened a bookshop, a physical bookshop. Now it's the largest bookstore. So you're seeing this need for human interaction and for some kind of physical aspect to what we're doing. Angami have realized this. Whilst understanding their niche and using the brand, they can attract new talent in music and be a showcase for that. They can provide a range of physical interactions that they're in a really good position to play. And most of all, they have a right to play in with confidence and with credibility. So you're seeing Angami branch its business out into different areas, but they're all related to what customers are wanting. And they're slowly but surely stepping their way through. As a commercial partner, we provide a platform for the distribution of some of this. And we know we pick and choose some of the events we may choose or not choose to play with. But we're one commercial partner of scores. So they've got many markets that they can play, many partners that they can play with. So they're essentially diversifying their risk, humanizing their brand, and expanding beyond different areas beyond what one would consider streaming or OTT playing to become more, to create more of a contact or connection with their audience in a way that they may not have imagined when they first started, but is a key pillar of why their success is continuing.
Yeah, no, that's a great example, of diversification for the OTT streaming platform, as you mentioned, into different dimensions and getting back to the physical world, which is, something we are all looking forward to these days after, especially after COVID. Jeff, to give a more broader overview of the OTT and the other key players. I know you guys work not only with you work with along the value chain and with a lot of broadcasting companies as well. So what's your view, from point of view of broadcasters, how they are envisioning and coming on board of this digital transformation? You see more broadcasters going into the digital and the streaming world, or still keeping their presence in the more linear TV or maybe catch-up TV? So how you, based on your experience and interaction, how you see the broadcasters reacting to this OTT phenomenon?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, indeed, it's all about the mix, and the traditional broadcasters coming from the linear really saw the importance was also moving into the more to the digital, the OTT level. But they did it in steps, moving from the linear traditional where they kept their core business, let's say, but then they moved to VOD, and now they are moving further on to OTT. In the past months, and I believe that coming in with Netflix and Disney Plus, the streaming also became very important. And to be honest, I think the COVID has accelerated this move and the speed to come to that streaming platform. But still, for them, it's the mix. And an extra element is social media, because you can't have good content without social media. And I think also in the gaming is a good example. Gaming, as Anthony mentioned, the game itself is the content, but now they are doing this gaming online with a lot of videos and content around, also in the stadium. So I think the mix is a very important element between how the consumer is conversating, how the consumer is collaborating with the content, and try to embrace all of these elements, which is not easy for traditional broadcaster because they are used to make good core content for linear. But the mix is a very important one. And there, of course, you see that's not an easy step for them, because it's changing their models, it's changing their approach, where creativity was one of the key drivers of the content. It's now more about, okay, but this content, how can we accelerate this on social media? How can we accelerate this on the streaming platform? So I think those elements are there. And it's also a learning path for the traditional one. Now, what you see on the opposite is, of course, that the OTT strong content players are used to work already because they are very mature already in digitalization and linking with social media. And now they try to move to the streaming and to the VOD. So you see two movements globally of those players. There is a difference between a public broadcaster and a commercial broadcaster, of course, but I think they both are challenging with the same elements. But definitely, again, it's a mix, and the difficulty is just to make sure that they can be up to speed and they can find the right balance. But that's definitely shifting faster and faster. Yeah.
Yeah. So we see more and more of this example.
Absolutely.
Then,
absolutely.
Yeah, looking at the future, because I think as you both guys mentioned, the environment is changing very fast. Technology is accelerating this development. What can we see, coming from the OTT industry in the next years? What trend can we see? There is a lot. We had the panel just yesterday with the other key players, and we talked some of the new trends, being VR, virtual reality, being AI, how data analytics also are shaping, content strategy and content preferences, 5G, as Anthony also mentioned, the acceleration of adoption of 5G and the streaming technology that are making the mobile and the TV experience as equal. So how you guys envision this sector to evolve? So I'd like to get Anthony's view first, and then Jeff coming back to you.
I think it's quite interesting because we're seeing a shift in the model of growth at the moment. If you think about it, content as it stands, and let's call it video or movie content and TV show content, started as old catalogs. Then it moved into new content, then specific new content for the actual platforms themselves, and the old rent in between the movie being in the cinema to then going on video or CD to then being certain places to then being as part of an age catalog. That's kind of gone, and you've leapfrogged straight to new content or direct to streaming content today. The growth will probably come in, I believe, in sport and what I call reality TV, because sport is the greatest reality TV show that there is. Nothing quite captures the drama, the energy, the fans. It connects physical with digital in a way that other content hasn't quite matched yet. Even though what we spoke about with e-games, it's not quite the same as watching the Super Bowl or the Champions League final or the ICC cricket or the NRL Grand Final live. These are very different experiences, but streaming's helping you do that. At the moment, you have very few content players. So we have beIN, who are now opening up some of their content to streaming as part of their partnerships with providers like ourselves. You have Disney with Disney Plus opening up ESPN. You also have aggregators, and the most well-known of the aggregators is DAZN, who are expanding rapidly. But even within that, you notice that there are, I'm from Australia, so I watched the NRL Grand Final on the NRL app. You're able to get the NBA app. So you're finding there's a different dimension in sports content where direct to consumer is happening. The NFL own their own rights. to their content and sell their rights, but are the owner of that relationship. That's quite interesting. So how will that restrict aggregation of content when some of the global players may want to say, well, actually, I want my supporters to buy through me, as opposed through someone else's aggregated platform and then being held to ransom by an aggregator. So I think there's some interesting dimensions starting to happen. I said, I think reality TV will be the play. I'm not, and by that I mean sport initially, but news content hasn't really gone global. There are channels on YouTube, but I think there's an evolution to come there. And the rise of TikTok has really changed, I think, the parameters of what eyeball attraction actually is. I mean, if someone had said 10 years ago that, the fastest growing channel in the world will be a channel that gives you 30 seconds updates of people who you've never heard of doing dances, showing you how to do rudimentary things like cooking or cleaning or dancing or singing or something to static tunes, you would have gone, you're crazy. But somehow that's become part of mainstream. So news content hasn't happened. User-driven, user-created stuff's becoming interesting. Sports content is ripe for further OTT unification. And the globalization of that as an OTT platform, I don't think is underway, but I think somewhere amongst the mixture of all of that feels like there's a business case that would work. And how you can participate in that value chain or that business is what we're figuring out now.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing this about sport. I would like to share also my personal experience, as I was part of the team from Abu Dhabi Media to launch UFC app, UFC Arabia. So this, it's something, challenging for operator to bring live event on streaming. And we heard, I'm in Italy, and now DAZN is also the Italian Premier League, stream. Live events for streaming has still a lot of challenges in quality of service and continuity, but it's something that is moving along, the innovation and the value chain, as well as Amazon invests on sports rights for the Champions League. And yes.
YouTube did the IPL. Facebook has picked up live content as well. So I think your question around it's technically problematic, and Jeff's probably a better person to answer this question. It's just a problem that will be solved. It's not insurmountable. I watched a grand final, which is the NRL equivalent in Australia, live on my device. Right. And it's in HD 4K, so you can watch the content. It exists. There is a 30-second or 60-second gap that'll just come down over time. It's just a problem that needs to be solved. I don't think it's an insurmountable problem. I don't think it's a game stopper, but it will get better and people will find advantage, and that's where you'll see it emerge. But and I think Jeff, from a tech perspective, Jeff's probably the better person to talk about.
Well, I'm not sure that I'm the best, but indeed, I just want to add one thing. I think sports and reality, I fully agree. I think we need to add games and music, because those three will be one of the key drivers of the content in the OTT. Now, what I strongly believe is this is all, let's say, produced content. And I think the future of OTT is where the personal content, like the TikToks and the Snapchats and the Instagrams, comes together with that gaming industry, sports industry, and music industry. And there is where I strongly believe there is a future. And technology, that's exactly why we're spending more than 20% on R&D, is because we believe that bringing content on a very efficient way into the let's say the tablet or the phone of the consumer, that's the future. Yeah? And this will go faster and faster and faster. Yeah? And I strongly believe that technology will follow, or technology will help to accelerate. But that direction of the personal content together with the produced content, that will come together. And you see it in some areas already coming together. And that's where technology can help you, support you, enable you to bring that on a very efficient way to each other. But I wouldn't be worried about the technology, to be honest. This will come. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, guys, thank you so much for sharing your insight. I think it was a very interesting discussion and we learned a lot from today's conversation, and wish to see you soon and continue this discussion next year. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.